Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Port Podcast, episode 252. I'm Benjamin Yoder here today, talking about video games. We actually have a good diversity of topics today, I feel like. However, we must start with some mourning. Unfortunately, Otocadoll and Oreca Battle have finally ended their service. So they ended on March 31st, which was something that was previously announced that was going to happen. So rest in peace. I'm sure they probably have some sort of offline mode you can interact with. What that is and what it does, I'm not really quite sure. And a lot of those arcade machines are being removed from the actual arcades themselves. Although I did see one had like a free play setup you could do where you could like pay a flat amount and they had the machine set on free play. And you could sit down and just play it for I think it's like 30 minutes to an hour or something like that. So I don't know if that's a long-term thing or they just like, while we have this machine, you can do this if you want kind of thing. So, but yeah, without that online mode, I don't think you can print cards or make new cards. And that's kind of essential for those games. Those games are built around you being able to get new cards and having those cards associated with your account. At least Otocadoll, all those cards are locked to your character. So you can't just like go in and like use somebody else's card and it like gives you something on your account. I'm not sure for Oreca Battle. Oreca Battle might be a little more flexible because things are built around like almost more a Pokemon style approach where Otocadoll was about like gearing up your character with like a loadout essentially. So you create those loadouts and put them in your card. So either way, the communities had their little day on that date. So they had like hashtags for like arigato Otocadoll or Oreca Battle. I think it's like Oreca Battle arigato and Otocadoll arigato or something like that. And then so they were posting up some art, their picture of their cards, all those things. I joined in for the Otocadoll one at least. I only played Oreca Battle once. I only found a machine at round 1 in Japan and only gave it one go. But I did go ahead and import something called a Oreca Battle, I think Perfect device is what the Google Translate spits it out as. Whether that's accurate, it's a whole other thing. But it's like a little handheld version of Oreca Battle, it seems like, where it has like a little mini version of it. And I don't think it uses like the cards that you use to play the game. Instead, it uses like these SD cards instead. And those SD cards are numbered. And I think there's 1 through 6. And there are multiple of these devices, so I think you have to kind of like upgrade to later devices to get all the cards to work. So like if you're on the last device, then I think you can use cards 1 through 6 versus the first one, you can only use like the first set of cards they released. But the later devices are very expensive now. I'm guessing whenever Oreca Battle was first announced to be shutting down, probably a lot of people picked those things up as a way to continue to play Oreca Battle in some fashion. And so they're like $300 now, which is not an amount I'm willing to pay for something like that. So the original device, which I believe has set card 1 and 2 in there, that one is, I believe, I paid $30 for it, which is a little high maybe, but I think reasonable, and I think it'll be fun to poke around with. I don't know how we'll poke around with that on the website yet, but I think it'll be a fun little thing to talk about at the very least on the podcast, assuming I can get it running. I know you can like connect it to the arcade machine in some way. I don't know if that is an essential step or if that is just something you can do with it. So yeah. Anyways, sad news, but I have happy news. I finally did it. I finally beat Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. It only took me like over a year. I don't want to get too much into details of why I stopped, but I think it was like late 2020 I started playing it, and I really like Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, but I kind of ran into 2 issues. One is I started working on an article that was kind of related to it, and that took priority for a bit, so I kind of put it on hold. The second thing was I was having an immense number of technical issues with the game that did not seem to be something that was reflected in most people's experience with the game, so I don't think there's like related to the game itself. And if you listen to some of those old podcasts, you probably hear me, it's around the time like right before we started streaming Quest 64, I was having a lot of issues with my Nintendo 64, so I thought maybe it was my Nintendo 64 that was causing problems. And so I replaced my 64, and that fixed a lot of issues I was having across a variety of games. So I think there was a problem with my Nintendo 64 itself. However, Indiana Jones continued to have issues, just not as bad. So I think both the cartridge and the 64 were bad, which is probably why the glitchiness was so bad. So I did have to deal with some glitchiness. There was some freezing. That was something that was continuing to happen. But I still was enjoying it. And despite the frustrations that came with the glitchiness that was happening, I still really enjoyed the game by the end of it. So I had to, at some point, just put it on hold, and then I just kind of lost track of it, right? Things get busy, and you go off and do other things. So that's just unfortunate of what happened there, but it did. But I'm happy to say I went and sat down and finally beat it, so I'm really happy about that. If you're ever like, I want to play Indiana Jones in the Infernal Machine, I think it's a great game to play. It is really cool, like kind of platformer, and it has like almost like Ocarina of Time style like items. You just get a variety of guns and stuff, and you just like can, like, they're assigned to like the C buttons. You can kind of move them to your A and B button and like shoot enemies with it and things like that. It feels very Zelda-like in a lot of ways, honestly. But maybe a little more PC-like. Maybe like Tomb Raider more than anything, honestly. And that was one of the complaints I saw about the PC version. I read IGN's review of the PC version, and apparently they were really unhappy with the controls in that version. And the particular thing they cited was that it felt like Tomb Raider's controls, which I have not played many games like Tomb Raider, so maybe that'd be a problem for me, maybe not. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. So that is something that might be a problem if you play that. But I think the 64 version is a good way to go. There's some visual downgrades for sure. But I think it is still a great version of that game. So if you are looking for really cool Nintendo 64 games you haven't played yet, I would definitely put Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine high on that list of games for you to check out. I will say I probably will not review it for two reasons. One, the immense gap between me playing the first 2/3 of that game and finishing it. And then also, because of the glitchy nature of my experience with using the Nintendo 64 and using the cartridge I have, I just feel like that my experience was probably tainted quite a bit. There was a lot of frustration I had in playing that game, and it was hard to tell what was the game's fault and what was the technical issue fault that I was having. So I might at some point, I kind of kicked this idea to my friend of maybe doing like a technical showcase of like our technical glitch showcase and like editing a bunch of stuff together. That might be something I do. It wouldn't be like any kind of main content. It'd just be like a little goofy video I upload. It might go to the archive channel instead or something. But I thought about maybe doing that. So I'll think about it. I did record pretty much my entire playthrough of that game. So very fun though, and I definitely highly recommend it if you're into those kind of things. I was not aware there's apparently an Indiana Jones game on the PS2 and Xbox. I was completely unaware of this. I think it's called the Explorer or something. I don't know. But I do have the Staff of Kings on the Wii, and I've always wanted to play that Staff of King games on the Wii. I think there's a PS2 and PSP version as well. At least a PS2 version, I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on that. I own the Wii version though. Although it's one of those games that like it probably uses the motion controls in a bad way, thinking about it. Like somebody was like, use the Wiimote for the whip, and then it's like, maybe this wasn't the best idea probably, but I have not played it. Maybe it's fine. So yeah, that's the Dead by Daylight people, I think, that worked on that game. I'm trying to remember what their name is. My brain is saying Bethesda. It's not Bethesda. Some people did Wet. Behavior Entertainment, that's who it was. So they made that game, the Wii one. The Infernal Machine's actually a Factor 5 game, interestingly enough. So yeah, so I went and played through that. That was a good time. And then one other thing I started this weekend, I unfortunately was not able to finish it, is installing my PC98's PC-FX-GA card. It's a lot of letters there and numbers. But if you haven't heard my rambling about this before, this is like literally a PCFX like on a board essentially that you can slide into a PC98, which is like a Japanese computer, and then utilize the PCFX within the PC itself essentially. It is really weird. It would be almost like shoving a GameCube into your current PC. It even on the PC98 has its own power source that it requires, so you have to plug a power source in. Very bizarre thing. There's also a DOS version, and the DOS version seems a little more integrated into the device or the PC itself, but it is still very much a separate thing. It launches a separate, video signal that goes to a different PC, and it like doesn't really check the OS for anything at all. Like it will launch up on its own, even if you don't like launch into the OS. It's very, very, very strange thing. So the card installation itself was very easy. I took the top off my PC98, but realized I actually did not need to do that. All I had to do was remove the metal plate on the back of my PC98 and slide the card in essentially. So very, very easy installation in that regard. However, I did run into a few problems. When it comes to the card itself, the issue I ran into was it needs to communicate with the disk drive, so it doesn't have its own disk drive. It does use the PC's disk drive. And I have not been able to, and by disk driving, CD drive, I should say, because the PCFX uses CDs. So I can't get it to recognize the the disk drive right now. I believe the reason why that's happening is because I actually don't have the whatever needs to be installed for MS-DOS to recognize the CD drive, I think is what it is. So so there's that thing. I also, to create the memory so you can actually save games, you have to use a floppy disk to install on the PCFX or on the PC98, and so you can basically have space to install save games to. So I started that process, but I think until I get the CD drive thing figured out, I can't advance in that process. So that's on hold there. So the CD drive thing is definitely the next most important thing. So that's really where I'm at like right now in terms of being stuck. However, I did have a significantly hard time getting to that point for unrelated reasons. So what's weird about this thing is, again, like I mentioned, the PCFX is kind of its own separate thing. So it has a video out that comes out of there. And the video out is the same as the PCFX. It's an S-video or composite video out. It's not using a RGB video signal from the PC itself. So what happens is, for me to utilize the PC98 at the same time to set up all this stuff, and then also, utilize the PCFX, I need to feed both of these things into an upscaler to make them work on my PC and allow me to capture them and display them on a screen, essentially. I only feed all my things into one screen, so I can't just easily do a dual layout setup where I have one captured one going to the other one and then the other one going to the other. I have to just flip between the screens, essentially, because of how my capture setup is. However, one thing I have not tested after I got my RetroTink was whether or not the PC98 would play nice with it. And maybe it can. I don't 100% know what's going on with it, but I could never get the PC98 to handshake with my RetroTink, unfortunately. So I had to go back to my FrameMeister, which I can get to handshake with it. And the FrameMeister, if you don't know, I'm using a RGB to VGA adapter, which goes into a sync I think sync timer or something like that. I don't know what it is. It's some kind of sync thing that's a box that I got from I imported it from Turkey, weirdly enough. And then that goes out into RGB as a SCART connection, and then that goes into the FrameMeister itself, and then that goes out from HDMI to my capture card. But keep in mind, this is for my PC98, so the PCFX is running separately. So I'm running two separate video signals through two different upscaling setups, and then back into one card, essentially. And it's just kind of a nightmare, and there's a few things I need to actually test with my PC98 still. I have sound card issues, so I haven't wired that stuff back up. But by the time I'm done setting this up, it's going to be a nightmare of stuff. And then that means I also have to add more power connections to my setup, because I'm going to have to plug the PC98 in addition to the PCFX-GA, in addition to a FrameMeister, in addition to the sync, whatever it is, the Turkey sync device I got whenever I purchased that to make the whole thing work for my PC98. So it means I have 4 new power outlets I need to fill in, and I don't necessarily have that space. I also ran into a problem with my step-down converter, that the PCFX-GA power box was too big for it, and it would press the power converter power switch off because of how big it is, and I could not flip it on because the box for it was in the way. So in the meantime, and I don't know if this is a fire hazard, but I have an extension cable plugged into the step-down converter, which then plugs into the PCFX-GA power brick. So it was an adventure. I'm not done yet. It's all literally just sprawled on the floor over here. It's kind of a bad setup for me this week in terms of recording the video, honestly. It's not a great situation I'm in right now, but I'll work on it a bit more. The big thing is I just need to install whatever that CD drive thing is, figure that out, and then at that point, I need to think about wiring this thing. So my original intention, if you didn't know, I talked a few weeks ago to increase the scale of this conversation. I wanted to move my Switch and Wii's up to the top shelf because it gives it more open airness, and I've been having issues with the Switch and Wii remotes disconnecting because of some reason. some kind of interference that's happening essentially. So I was like, maybe if I don't have it down at the bottom shelf, like in a cupboard, essentially, I can move those things up to the top and get a better connection. So I moved the PC98 down to the bottom shelf, or that was the intention. I've not done it yet. However, the PCFX controller connector is on the back of the PC98. So that means if I put it on the bottom shelf, I don't know if the cable's going to reach up to my desk. So I think I might have to put it on the middle shelf, which means I have to move my PS2, Nintendo 64, and all that stuff down a shelf. And worst case scenario, if that doesn't work, I'm going to have to move my upscalers, which are on the top shelf, down to the shelf below. So it's just a nightmare right now. This project was a nightmare, but before I reorganize anything, I'm going to get the PC-FX-GA working. But once I have it done and working, that basically is a PC-FX that's sitting there. So, for all intents and purposes, it is the same thing. So, it will be me being able to try some things out on there. We'll be playing some Dojin games probably at some point. I'll have to figure out how to load those on. There's a lot of steps in this process for the PC-FX-GA to actually work, unfortunately. So I think we'll get there. So yeah. And then if that works, great. Then maybe I don't have to use my old PCFX as much. And because it's a standard CD drive, assuming I can get it to work, that means I don't have to worry about the laser, dying. I just have to worry about my PC98 dying. so that's just an option there for that. So very exciting stuff for that. So that was pretty much my things to do this week. So in terms of, now that Indiana Jones is finished, there's a couple different routes I can take in terms of finishing games. Buddy Mission Bond is a great option right now. And then also Curse of the Moon 2, I could go through and try to solo finish that. I have a friend who wants to play that on PC though. I just have to start over when we do that. So part of me wants to optimize my time and push Curse of the Moon off until me and my friend sit down and play through that. But I worry with Generation Zero and Crystal Chronicles going on, that's not going to be something that happens anytime soon. We actually did play a little bit of Apex this weekend as well. However, I might, in the short term, maybe encourage us to play Curse of the Moon 2 if we decide to play Apex instead. Be like, hey, let's swap this out and try to get through Curse of the Moon 2. We haven't tried it yet. It's local multiplayer only for Curse of the Moon, so we're going to have to do a Parsec or Steam streaming setup or something like that. Probably start with Steam streaming and see if that works. And then worst case scenario, maybe a Parsec setup or something like that. For that. So anyways, so I think Buddy Mission Bond is pretty high on that list. I feel like I'm missing something else. I feel like there's one other thing that I was going to try to sit down and play through at some point. I might look at how long Kogan is. I would like to get Kogan off my plate. That is something I would like to do, and I hear it's a short game. Let me see if I can figure out real quick while we're sitting here how long to beat Kogan. Okay, so it sounds like you play through the 5 stages. It's very quick and easy. And then there's another, you play through the 5 stages again, but the difficulty of them has been ramped up significantly. So we'll see. Buddy Mission Bond is going to be a pretty big commitment. So I'm going to do a little bit of kind of rethinking things. I'm going to focus on the PC-FX-GA this week. I also do need to get back to Sparkling Feather here. So that's probably the real answer, is get back to Sparkling Feather, honestly. So that's probably what's going to take priority over Buddy Mission Bond. If you don't know what I need to do with Sparkling Feather, it's not that important, but I would like to do it, is try to get the good ending to Sparkling Feather. I don't think I'm going to be able to figure that out, unfortunately. There's not a lot of resources online, but I really am hopeful that I can figure it out before I do that kind of PCFX English guide. I kind of already know what I want to say about the English guide. I will say I have been thinking recently about, with the English guides, making them more full videos, because the amount of effort it took to do the Ojo-sama Susomu one, it made me think I might as well kind of also talk about the game itself at the same time. I think there's a couple reasons I'm thinking of that. One is PCFX games in particular have particular quirks to them, and even though I'm kind of the mind of hey, you should determine whether or not you want to play this on your own, I think it'd be good to talk a little bit about the game. I just don't want to do some crazy long review, and I don't want to tell you not to play a game. That is the big thing I don't want to tell you to don't play something. I will tell you what's good and bad about it. I think it's going to happen, but I'm not going to tell you to whether or not you should buy it or not, I think is the thing. I think is what I want to try to do with that. So I say that, but then I think in the Battle Heat review, I did mention, buying that if you wanted to check it out. But anyways, so there we go. That's all that. So it's time. It's Patreon time. Hey, just heads up. Last week I said we were going to have the Jumping Flash casual review that was unfinished going up. I pushed that back a week because Nintendoji video is coming out this week. So I'll talk about that more later. But the Jumping Flash videos can be pushed back to next week. So I moved all the dates for that. Hopefully. I believe I did. So if you don't know, for the Patreon, there's 2 Patreon levels. The $5 Patreon level that gets you the bonus content, like that unfinished Jumping Flash casual review that will be going up there. However, if you do the $3 Patreon level, and if you're at the $5 one, you can also ask a Patreon question for the podcast. And so every week we have a podcast question that comes up. And then if you want to ask a question, all you have to do on the Patreon is go to the post that goes up on Mondays, typically around like 3 p.m. Pacific time, but sometime that evening, and go ahead and ask your question in there. Until we get multiple questions in a week, we're not going to worry too much about, who goes when and what. If we suddenly start getting a bunch of questions per week, we'll figure that out. But for now, pretty much if you're going to comment on there, you're going to get your question answered at this point. So yes. Anyways, so this week for the Patreon, we have Discreet, Jillian, and Paul Daniel again. Those 3 are our Patreon subscribers. And we also have a question from Jillian this week, which is, how long did it take, or what's the longest it has taken for you to finish a game start to finish? Now, there's a few answers for me here. Jillian had a response in here that it took her 11 years to finish off Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is probably honestly one of the first games I ever beat, to be honest with you. Like, that Ocarina of Time is a game that I remember sitting down and thinking about, how do I get to the end of this? Where I feel like most games before that, I did not really think about that much. Like, I played Mario 64, but at no point did I think about, how do I finish Mario 64? I just did whatever it was, and then if I got to the end, I got to the end. Ocarina of Time was very much like the credits roll. I'm going for it. I'm going to go defeat Ganon kind of thing for me. So anyways, so the answer to this for me very much depends on what you mean by like longest it took you for you to beat a game. If we're going to talk about absolute longest, Final Fantasy XI is a big one just because of the fact it's an MMO and that story was told over the course of 15 to 20 years. And so even if you wanted to beat that in a short time, you couldn't. You could maybe count like individual expansions or something like that on its own, but that's probably the technically right answer because that's when the actual story ended, was with I forget what it's called, the Rhapsodies of Vanadil, I believe it was called. Although they recently have been adding story again, but I think it's like fairly like minor stuff. And then the other one I could probably say is Xenoblade Chronicles X. I didn't finish that game till January last year, and I received that game 3 weeks before launch, I think, if I recall correctly, or 2 weeks before launch, maybe. It was a time frame before launch within that month, essentially. And I only finally beat it early last year. I did have some other games as well, like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, which is a game that I got to the end of the game multiple times, but because of variety of reasons, playing Phantasy Star Online and things like that, sometimes you end up with a corrupt memory card, and I lost my progress in Crystal Chronicles multiple times near the end of the game frequently. So I forget when I finished Crystal Chronicles, but definitely was it took a long time for me to get to there. And while I didn't technically finish in quotes Crystal Chronicles those first few times I played through it, I more or less consider myself having beat the game at that point because I really just got stuck on the final boss. And then my last playthrough on the GameCube version, I was like, I'm not taking any risks. I'm grinding the hell out of this game. So I grinded and then got to the boss and just like blew through it and was like, okay, cool, done. And then I played the HD version. So Crystal Chronicles is the game that I've probably beaten, one of the most beaten games I have outside of maybe like Resident Evil 4 and like Ocarina of Time maybe. So and those games all kind of like were spread out for a variety of reasons. So there's large gaps in times of when I played them. So the other factor we could talk about here is the longest game I played that was like fairly consistently that I was playing it. And Final Fantasy 12 is one. I played that like in little chunks and bits over the course of 1 year. And it really messed up how I perceived that game at the time because I was so used to playing like RPGs within like a weekend kind of thing, like getting 20 to 40 hours in over the course of like a week or something like that because you're a kid, whatever, do fucking whatever you want. But the Final Fantasy 12 I kept putting off because I was playing Final Fantasy 11 and I loved Final Fantasy 11 so much. So the main reason I played Final Fantasy 12 is whenever my sister asked me to. So I'd put it in and play, and I play for like whatever length of time she's gonna hang out in my room for. And then once she was gone, I was like, back on to Final Fantasy 11, baby. So yeah, that game took me about a year, and I don't remember much of it at all. That is one of the Final Fantasies I need to replay, alongside Final Fantasy 8 is another Final Fantasy I need to replay. But I will probably not replay them, unfortunately. So that's it for the Patreon. Again, thank you guys so much for contributing to that. If you want to ask a question, again, just the $3 Patreon level. If you want bonus content, we had the PC-FXGA unboxing video that came out a couple weeks ago now. That Jumping Flash unfinished casual reviews coming up here shortly. And then I did go ahead and record my installation of the PC-FXGA card itself into my PC98, so you can see me struggle with that because I'm bad with my hands on things. I will say the whole PC98 process of setting that up to my capture setup, I did not record. That is just something I need to do. You know, it probably would be interesting to show the problems I run into, but like actually trying to do that, you know, while I'm working on other things is a very hard thing to do. I'm not sitting down and just doing that. I'm like jumping between doing other things as well. So yeah, but I am kind of recording certain parts of the process in terms of, you know, installing things, you know, running the disk and things like that. That will not be in the next video probably. That will be in the video afterwards probably. So at the end, we're probably getting like a 3-parter to this PC-FXGA thing for the Patreon itself, essentially. So again, thank you. It's time for news. I know I mentioned before for New Game Plus Expo, I was going to try to stream it. I did not wake up in time to stream it, unfortunately, so rest in peace. And I'll be honest with you, I saw this event broken up in many chunks. I did not see the entire thing all in one go. So I don't really have a great concept for exactly what was in there and how it was presented. I will say there was a lot of indie games in there that didn't look like the things I would expect from New Game Plus Expo or whatever. I usually think of smaller Japanese games when I think of that. So seeing some of those indie games in there was kind of like, does this really fit in what's going on here? I don't know. So, but hey, whatever. It's probably like scale-wise, for sure. Just like that's just not the topic I'm looking for. It's like when Sony was like, we're having Japanese announcements for this state of play, and then they throw like Returnal in there, and like, what is Returnal doing here? Like, what's going on? So yeah. My favorite Japanese studio, Housemarque Games. So yeah. In terms of interesting things for us from New Game Plus Expo, Gunvolt 3 got a release date of July 28th. Limited run games per usual, so probably be importing that. I've already said what I'm going to say about that, but I'll just kind of remind you guys real quick. You know, I am interested in Gunvolt 3. I thought the character mechanics looked pretty cool. You like basically have these cards you throw and you tag enemies. So it's very similar to how Gunvolt tags enemies, but then it's more like Copen in terms of how you attack, where the girl, I think her name's Kieran, jumps to enemies and attacks them like that. So she's kind of like a cool mix between Gunvolt and Copen put together. I believe in the past trailers, they've also shown her ability to like deflect projectiles and things like that as well. So that is a component there too. So I'm excited for that game. Just the fact that I have Gunvolt, Luminous Avengers, X2, and Kogan means that I'm just not super like, I don't feel like I need Gunvolt 3. This is like within a 6-month window, we're getting 2 Gunvolt games and a Gunvolt like that is officially sanctioned by Inti Creates essentially. So just kind of weird timing on that. So I will probably pick it up just because I definitely know I want to play that character. So I'll get there, but I'll probably import it again just to avoid the limited run games year-long wait kind of thing with that. So, but yeah, July 28th is when that's coming out. There's a re-release of Rhapsody coming out, Rhapsody, a musical adventure. I only ever played the DS release of this game, which is actually kind of a different game than the PlayStation version. The release they're putting in this collection they're doing, I think it's like Disgaea or NIS America Collection Volume 3 or something like that. They're including the PlayStation version of that game in there, it seems like. I'm hoping that they keep the dub in there because I love the English tracks for the music and stuff like that. I think Disgaea games typically have dubs today, so I would expect that to be the case. Obviously, I would also really hope that they include the original Japanese tracks in there. I'm not sure how like their track record has been with that in NIS America or not, but very excited to see that re-release. There are multiple of those games in that Rhapsody franchise, so I think it would be really cool to see more of those come out and be localized. Whether they happen or not is a whole other thing, but very cool. If you don't know, the Rhapsody musical adventure is like a very simple, the DS one's like a simple JRPG, the PlayStation one's like a simple strategy RPG. Not great games per se, but very charming, great soundtrack, all that fun stuff. Very cute story as well with that. Jeanne got its actual English announcement release date. So I don't think beforehand they mentioned when this was going to be coming out. But they did announce on the Japanese Twitter that they were going to have localized versions of Jeanne. This is that otome rhythm game that I've talked about a couple times. I have not looked at the trailer for this yet, I will say, so I don't know if something cool is shown off in there at all, but I imagine it's just what we've already seen with that great art style, by the way, for that game. Anyways, Jeanne is getting a 2023 English release date, so it's actually pretty far out, which I'm okay with. I can take the time. Maybe by the time that thing comes out, I will be ready for it. Right now, I'm not ready for it, but maybe. So, anyways, Jeanne, that's going to be coming out 2023. They also showed off some Pocky and Rocky. I'm on the fence about getting Pocky and Rocky. I do really want to try it out. I think what will probably be a big thing for me is if it has online multiplayer or not. I think I wouldn't mind playing through it with somebody. The physical version of the game does not seem that expensive for the Japanese release, and I think the US English release is coming through strictly limited games, which I don't know if that's the same situation as Limited Run, where it's like, we're going to take a year to ship this to you kind of thing. I've only had one strictly limited game, and I was gifted it, the Umuhari Kawase plus edition or whatever game that was. So yeah, that is coming. We've talked about that before. I already have Snow Princess Sayuki I need to play through, so the real answer is I need to play Snow Princess Sayuki, which is also a multiplayer thing, so I might try to recruit someone for that eventually as well, too. But I have the Wii version, so I probably should just play the PC version. That's probably what's going to happen. Probably going to just count playing the PC version as finishing the Wii version. So yeah. There's a PS2 game called Kamiwaza, which is kind of like a ninja game. It reminds me a little bit of like the Shinbodu series or something like that. There's a lot of those kind of like ninja games in the PS1 and PS2 era. So like to me, it doesn't really stand out. Like this kind of looks like a lot of these games to me. But it was like a late PS2 release and didn't get localized. So I'm all on board for that coming out here. I think it's coming out on PS4, Switch, and I don't know if it was coming out on Xbox or not. So Kamiwaza still looks very cool. I think it's an Acquire game actually specifically. So. And then there was a on-rail shooter called the spelling on this, Horgy Who and the Friends. Just kind of like a cute little side-scrolling shooter. I'll never play it, but it just had a really cute aesthetic, and I appreciated it being in the show itself. So a little low on announcements for me for New Game Expo, but again, like I said, I didn't exactly pay a ton of attention. But Jeanne coming 2023, great. We just kind of already knew that. Gunvolt 3, we've been knowing about that game for a while. The new gameplay looks great, though, I will say. So those are kind of the big things. And Rhapsody re-release, I don't think I will purchase Rhapsody again, but like really good on them for re-releasing that game. That was a very cool video game. Just maybe not a great game. So yeah. And the last two news stories here are pretty short ones. Monster Hunter Riders is ending its service. We probably haven't talked about Monster Hunter Riders since it was originally announced. This is a Monster Hunter mobile game that was designed in the style of Monster Hunter Stories. And at the time, Monster Hunter Stories 2 was not announced. So as much as I loved the look of the game, I was always kind of lamenting the fact that Monster Hunter Stories 2 was not a thing yet. Now Monster Hunter Stories 2 was a thing and released, so, I kind of got what I wanted, but it is still sad to see Monster Hunter Riders end service. I do like the visual aesthetic of the game a lot. I think I know somebody who played that game a little bit, but I don't think it ever got localized. I think it was Japan only, and, the reality is that most mobile games, especially gacha ones, are not really going to be for me, unfortunately. I will occasionally jump onto them, but just not super frequently. And the last story here is that E3 has been fully canceled for this year, so no digital event. No physical event, so we're going to be stuck with just Summer Game Fest overall. I will say the one thing, obviously there's the nostalgic factor with E3. I'm not going to get into that. I don't think that's really a lot of value in that unless we're just going to talk about, celebrity CEOs and the how those things were presented. I'll be honest with you, I've always preferred kind of the older E3 stuff with like the more business-oriented stuff, but that's just me. I like those kind of business conference-y kind of calls for video games. GDC talks, very cool, things like that. But anyways, all that aside, the thing that I really like that E3 still brought to the table, pre-COVID and everything, was the bringing everything and announcing everything kind of all at this one blast of time. So everyone's kind of showing off what they have. And especially with Summer Games Fest, that has become less and less of a thing now. So it's a sad to see it not show up this year. They did say they're going to try again for next year, but even before all this happened, people were really antsy about what E3 was actually going to be because E3 was just becoming less and less relevant of a show. So, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have anything kind of replace that. I don't personally feel like Summer Game Fest is something that really replicates that E3 feeling, to be honest with you, because it is so spread out. If Jeff can tighten that window up more, I think I would be a lot more interested, because then it's here's this timeline of things that are going to happen, kind of thing. But, and then with how things are, even if you did tighten that timeline, things are announced throughout the year all the time now. So it's just the reality of the current modern day, but still kind of definitely feels like an end of an era to some degree. But in the reality, probably not that big of a deal outside of old people like me being wistful. Is wistful a word that I want to use here? I'm just I look at the video version, I got this little pokey poke of my hair sticking out. Hello, pokey poke. Woo! Anyways, so yeah. And that's it for the show this week. Thank you for coming. OneControllerPro.com is the website. As I mentioned earlier, Nintendo G video. It is done. I have confirmed it is launching Wednesday this week at 9 a.m. unless something crazy happens. That is happening. So I'm very excited for it. Please take a look at it and watch the video. I really hate pushing this kind of stuff, but I really don't know what to do in terms of spreading these kind of things, in terms of where I should share them, how to get traction on them. I did a very YouTube-y kind of YouTube thumbnail of it being an amazing DSiWare game or DSiWare game you never played kind of thing, which I don't like doing that, but it does. I do notice when I change those thumbnails to lean more in that direction, that definitely helps with success and things like that with that. So we'll see. But anyways, really though, if you can, please share it. That would be a big help to me. If you have any communities you're a part of that would be interested in a Nintendo DSiWare exclusive that is, an import obscure title, I think there's probably a lot of communities where that's relevant. I feel personally a bit, unable to do that, really, just because I'm not part of those communities. So it feels rude for me to come in and post in them. I've definitely kind of played with the idea of posting in Reddits from time to time, but I really try to respect their rules. I don't want to come in and just to promote. Even if I just come in to talk for a week and then get out after I promote, it still feels dirty to me in a lot of ways. So if you do know somebody, or you knew a group that you do that likes that kind of stuff, I would really appreciate if you shared it. I do think Nintendo G is a game that needs a lot more love as a whole as well. So I would really appreciate it. In terms of stream stuff, this upcoming week, we're going to try to finish up Pac-Man World 2. I don't expect that to be a problem. I think we're near the end of the game. We should be able to end it pretty early. We also are going to do a casual review, I'm sure of it too. I think we'll have extra time at the end of the stream. My original plan was to stream Akazuken Cha-Cha, the board game on the PC-FX. We will not be doing that. The reason being is that I looked into it recently, and it seems like unless you know what to do going forward, if this is even a thing, I don't even know, those games can go for hours. So we're going to put that on hold until I can do some more research about the game. And also, it'll probably be something that I'll try to do with the PC-FX-GA. So we will probably try to do it there. So that is happening. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to play the Sky Surfer, which is a PS2 import game. Looks very much like a Simple Series game. We're going to play that, hopefully have a great time with that. And then after Pac-Man World 2, we're starting that shift to focus more on Japanese games. So I put up a poll on YouTube if you want to go vote. There are 3 games on there, although really one I'm going to try to, I'm going to hope is not going to win because I learned something about it this week. So Crime Crackers, it's the PS1 kind of dungeon crawling first-person shooter. That's on that list. And then it's currently, at least as of this recording that I'm doing it, tied with Deep Freeze, kind of like an action survival horror kind of game with really cheesy, fun voice acting. So those are the 2 highest voted ones. The third one is Hard Luck. Now, I picked up Hard Luck thinking it was a Japanese exclusive. It is not. There's a PAL version of Hard Luck. However, it is $200, so I don't mind picking up the Japanese version. But I would probably use Hard Luck as an opportunity, along with some other games, to learn how to get games on the PS2 from other regions and essentially use the ISO or whatever, going around what we got to do. So I just keep the physical version of the Japanese one, and then we just play the PAL version. There's a couple different ways to do that in my understanding. There's ways you can do it with burning games directly. There's ways you can do it with mod chips, and then there's ways you can do it with the memory card in more recent years. That latter option being probably the one I'm most interested in for that. So I got to figure that one out. It has an SD card slot on there. So I don't believe those are readily accessible. So I don't know like what the timeline of that would look like. So it's something I just need to look into. It's just not like high on my priority list right now. But Hard Luck is losing that poll as much as I would honestly have preferred Hard Luck to win. Now that I know there's a PAL release called, I think it's called like Firefighter Heroes or something like that, or Hero Firefighter or something like that. I would prefer just play the PAL version. Play it in English. Like I said during the PC-FXGA or the Japanese games, if you don't know Japanese, if you have the opportunity to play something in English, just play it in English. It's going to be the better thing for you if you're not going to be willing to learn Japanese. So, yes. And then after the Nintendo OG video, I don't have any set plans quite yet. As I mentioned earlier, Sparkling Feather is probably something I need to get back to, so we can do the Sparkling Feather English guide video. Finally! It's going to be like a year after I said I wanted to do it, once we get down to it. That's going to be on my PCFX though, because my save file is on my PCFX, so we're going to stick to that. I don't even have to really finish it if I want to do the English guide video, but I would like to at least give a shot to try to get to the end. Unfortunately, trying to get a good ending in that game has a lot of complicated factors that I don't really know what to do with. That game might require multiple playthroughs. I don't know, to be honest with you, so yes. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you again for coming. OneControlPro.com is the website. And again, Patreon content has bonus content there if you want to check that out too. Otherwise, I hope you have a great week. Bye.